Can you say hard hats, folks? Hard hats, lunch pails, steel-toe boots.
Anything short of a championship this year is a failure.
Look at this boomer right here.
You've just got so much talent here.
Somebody said we need to apologize for Jalen.
Can I quote it, John? What are we apologizing for? What did we say? What did we do?
We're back, Bobby. What? For everyone who watches The Office, I am the living embodiment of that Jim Halpert. What is going on? Meme right now. Cut the music. Like, what is going on? We were coming on here to talk about the Derrick White contract extension, which is great. I'm not going to say predicted. We had some questions yesterday whether it would happen. I was leaning yes, and it happened, and there was rejoicing. And then another bombshell since that happened. It was Wyc Grousbeck and the Celtics are looking to sell the team after this year. That's it. Like, wow, right? I think people are still trying to wrap their minds around, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? But I don't know. We'll have to kind of wait and see. So let's react to the news. I think backwards here. I wanted to do White first, but I think I gotta go with Wyc here.
I think you're right.
You gotta go with the most recent because it's the one that involves a fair amount of like unpacking to figure out what it is that's going on here. The Celtics ownership group, led by Wyc Grousbeck, planning to make the team available for sale. A little bit more insight into it with this statement that was released here. And can I see all of it? Yeah. Boston Celtics, Boston Basketball Partners L.L.C, the ownership group of the Boston Celtics, announced its intention to sell shares of the team. Controlling family of the ownership group, after considerable thought and internal discussion, decided to sell the team for estate and family consideration. Managing board of the ownership group expects to sell majority interest in 2024-25, with the balance closing in 28. Expect Wyc Grousbeck to remain the governor until closing in 28. So that's it. Out. And I guess I'll get your initial reaction first, Bobby. I have some thoughts, but I'm still just trying to wrap my mind around a few elements of this. But I think fans right now are kind of looking at Wyc a little bit as a martyr. Like, he did what it took. He paid the bill. It's a little bit of a dine and dash situation. He ordered the most expensive champagne and had a terrific meal and served it up to Celtics fans. And now that the bill is going to come due and we're in second apron hell going forward in a monumental tax bill, cash out. And that's it. It's understandable. We joked about this, Bobby, which is why we were always afraid in the past, right? I don't know if Wyc's going to go there with the money, if he's going to go deep into the tax and all of those things, because it's weird to call somebody who's a multi-millionaire poor, but by NBA owner standards, he's not one of the top dog, super rich, billionaire guy in terms of assets. His greatest asset is the team. And now he's cashing it in, bought it for 316. And the estimated return here is going to be $5 billion, on this thing, which is bananas.
At least, right? Who knows what that championship did for the evaluation here. And think of the increase over 2002, as you see there, 360 million, 1,200% increase in the valuation of the team. So given the new financial reality of the league, the luxury tax situation, and we can take a look at that in a little bit here in terms of what the Celtics are paying, this felt inevitable. Now, did we expect it this soon? No. But when you look at the timeline as the Celtics laid out there, that this is going to take until 2028, it makes some sense that they're starting this now. His goal always was banner 18, right? And he'll obviously be there for the repeat attempt and the third year run back if they're trying to do a three-peat here, if they repeat next year. So he's here for that window, right, John? And then once the uncertainty begins around 2027, 2028, they're going to transition to undoubtedly a much more wealthy group or individual here. And tough to speculate on who that could be. But obviously there's some big names that have gotten involved in the chase for franchises around the league. Matt Ishbia, the mortgage giant out there in Phoenix, Michael Bloomberg got involved in the Minnesota sale, which is about as rich as you can get as far as owners go. So that's the kind of money we're talking about now with ownership groups in this league. And it will almost undoubtedly be a group that buys this team. But at least according to the statement there, I know Adam Himmelsbach put out a statement that the other owners are looking to stay intact. That statement makes it sound like, John, that Wick's out, Pagliuca is out, all of the owners from this group who obviously oversaw so much success in the later years of their ownership here are out. So certainly some anxiety and uncertainty warranted here. This is a group, John, obviously, that prioritize winning basketball and investing in the franchise over maybe making as much money as they could or managing the bottom line. And they certainly showed that aggressiveness to go into the tax that some other teams with their money might not have been able to do here in recent years. So I get the slight panic here among fans because your GM, you can mess around with that. That can change year in and year out. Your coach is going to change. If you don't get a good owner here, that's life, right? Like the rest of your life is probably going to be the next ownership group.
It's crazy, right? Because a couple of years ago, people were crying for a sale because it was a fear that Wick wouldn't go deep into the tax or spend, or they'd always, try to stay low here. And oftentimes prior to a sale, Bobby, you go in the opposite direction. You start to trim it down to make it more attractive to sell, which is not sign anybody. So the fact that he did this with the intention of selling is interesting and kind of unorthodox. People thought John Henry might have been trying to do the same thing with the team, with the Red Sox when they stopped spending money, and really he was just being more prudent, just and cheap, I guess, depending on how you want to say it. But in this case, it's the opposite direction. Is there's a massive bill. Anybody coming in knows that they're going to have to pay big. And I guess what gives you pause here is seeing is there a world in which new owners come in and they're like, as I've always said, owners should view these things not as a business, but as a vanity. I've always wanted to own a team and I own it and it costs what it costs, but it's not my number one moneymaker. I have another successful business doing other things. And this is just what are you looking at, Bobby? This is a terrifying expression on your face.
Some lightning.
But then you see something like Steve Ballmer, who's like one of the top 10 richest people on the planet.
Right. Throw him in the mix.
Deciding that the Clippers, that he didn't want to spend for Paul George, and they want to operate under the second apron. What? What are we talking about? This is banana land to me. So,
should I look up
I don't know.
richest people in the world? see who's gonna be in the mix here.
Who knows, man? I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy here.
It is crazy, but it's expected, right? Wick wasn't going to own this team forever. We knew at some point, as the cost of overseeing this team continued to rise, that he would make a sale. It's just a different era for the league now. It's difficult for him to keep up with the cost of this team, I'd imagine, given the tax payments they're going to have to make here into the future. And we've had our conversation, John. Obviously, the top 5 is locked up now. The starting lineup's locked up through 2026. You can split up any one of those guys into multiple smaller contracts when the time comes, but that's still going to involve staying in the tax. That's still going to involve paying big money for this team until you start to just let guys go. And at that point, do a little bit of a mini reset at that time. So the timing here makes sense because when Wick and those guys get out, it's going to be around the time that you start to go into a new era there with Tatum and Brown or whoever it might be at that point. So he's here for this next couple year run. Brad's here for this next couple year run. And then after that, who knows what's going to be left over here beyond the pieces that they have right now. So you got to be thrilled, and you got to realize if you're the Celtics right now, this next year, 2, 3, it's all or nothing. You got to go for it. You got to do everything you can to win these next handful of years, and that's why Derrick White is extended here. That's why Sam Hauser's probably going to be extended here. You just got to keep as much of this roster together as you can, and then it's going to be on the next ownership group to figure out what to do from there. And they're obviously going to have deeper pockets to figure it out at that point. But obviously, everybody is just clamoring to see who will it be.
Yeah.
What are their priorities? Are they as focused on winning as the Celtics group was, or is the next group just going to be trying to make money? And then there's a million questions beyond that. They don't own the building. Would that ownership group look to build a new arena or something like that? How
You
would they
just don't
start
see
to
that. You're
increase
not going to
revenue?
have that. It's just you just don't really see that, and that would be
Yeah.
difficult. But yeah.
Yeah, so it's a long term. I mean, this isn't Wick selling the team tomorrow and being. This is a long term
No,
over the next
it's a
decade
lot
kind
to
of.
unpack. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not panic time, but it's certainly a stunning headline to read today.
And again, minutes after and I know this is what everyone's freaking out over. Oh, nobody wants to see that. Someone's got to kidnap John Henry. Actually, if I say that and it happens, I'm probably going to be an accessory. But John Henry can't be allowed to do this.
And he's the
Cannot be
first name
allowed.
you think of, right?
He is. He is. But holy crap. Holy crap. So again, the reason we're talking about this first is it requires a lot of unpacking, and we don't know exactly what it means. And honestly, you won't know what it means until you move forward, with the sale and find out, who the person is going to be and whatever. Let's be realistic. Wick spent because he knew he was cashing out. Would he have continued to do this forever if he remained owner? No. So the people out there saying this is a bad thing, let's be real. Like, Wick did what he did and is doing what he's doing because he went all in for a championship. Yes, it is going to be somebody else's mess to clean up, but if Wick didn't sell, Wick would have had to find a way, financially speaking, to get this team out of the second apron and not have to pay this hefty tax bill year after year very soon, which meant if it stayed under Wick and this ownership group, they would have had to find a way out of it. So anybody thinking the new person's going to come in and gut it, Wick would have probably had to do it also. So he gets out clean, he cashes in, and it's less about the new owner, and it's more just about the new economic reality of the NBA, of who you have. Yes, there's definitely concern that you would bring in a John Henry type. That's scary, but ownership is ownership. Like, if you're an owner, if you own the team, Bobby, and your GM's coming to you and be like, can I get this and can I get that? You'd have to think like, look, man, for a contender, I'll spend. I'm going to out myself a little bit here. John Henry's philosophy is actually correct. But the way he goes about it and the way he talks to fans like they're idiots, and that everyone will understand, is what hurts him. It's his presentation. It's the fact that he's an alien, and doesn't understand how the plebs think. Like, yeah, you should not be. I mean, the Clippers are doing it now. I'm looking at this roster and I don't see a championship team. So we're gonna go backwards to take a step forwards. That's what you're supposed to do. You can't just say throw money at everything. The Celtics threw money at everything here because they felt really good about their championship chances and they feel good about their window here in the next 2 to 3 years. But then going forward, there's going to be some gutting, and honestly, very likely to feature only one Supermax player and not two. So you got to decide which of these guys you like best, because this wouldn't be shocking that something like that is going to happen in a couple of years. It's not a today problem, but the economic reality of the NBA, the bill is coming due for someone at some point, and it would have come due for Wick, who would have had to make some difficult decisions going forward. So I'm not super concerned that, like, oh no, the new guy is going to be cheap. No, the new guy is going to be faced with the same economic reality that everybody else is.
Yeah.
The downside, and this is fair, is Wick was a fan, but Wick was a fan who also knew that he had, that he wasn't, made of money. So he had limitations. And yes, it does help when they're a fan as opposed to, like I said, the worst thing about John Henry is they claimed they were fans when they came in, and now he's using the word asset to describe the Red Sox, and they're buying a bunch of other stuff, and you don't know where his loyalty lies. Yes, absolutely. You want somebody who kind of gets it, and that makes a difference. You have it with Kraft, and you have it here, with Wick. You've never had it with the Bruins, and that's why everybody hates Jacobs. So yeah, that would be nice, but I don't know. I really don't know what it's going to be. It'd be interesting when the names start to pop up, and who knows? I think that's going to start happening pretty soon. You'll start to hear some ideas. Yeah. I mean, if the idea is that they're cashing out by the end of the year, by the end of the next season, I think there's going to be some people here.
Yeah, and the other ownership groups emerged pretty quickly in those other situations after Sarver sold the Suns and Glenn Taylor put the Wolves up for sale. So it's going to be pretty notable names, you'd have to imagine, given the cost of this franchise, and maybe it will be Henry. The Henry thing's interesting. If you're him, obviously his target had been Vegas. That franchise still seems uncertain. I know Silver's still kicking around Mexico City, and they just keep kicking back that whole thing because of the TV negotiation here. So that doesn't look like it's going to happen until close to the end of the decade there. And obviously there's a massive expansion fee associated with that. So I'm sure that would be, believe it or not, a more expensive purchase for FSG, considering that to go out there to Vegas. I'm sure they'll have to build a new arena out there to go back to that conversation, unless they're just moving into that T-Mobile arena out there. So do you pivot to the team in your backyard? Obviously I think there'd be some appeal there to having another team in the same city. It's hard not to go to that.
I mean, he
name,
wanted
right?
the Bruins. He wanted the Bruins. Couldn't get the Bruins. Got the Penguins instead.
Right. And from Wick's perspective, as unpopular as Henry is, he is a local guy who bought in on the Red Sox and succeeded and prioritized winning there. It's a very unpopular name right now, but in, I don't know, 2013, John, this would have probably been a popular choice to buy the Celtics.
Yeah, can't do it. Sorry, just can't do it. But it's happening. I mean, Cuban just did it. And sold his majority.
The Cuban one's
there.
the scary version of this, right? Where it goes to this like gambling, big money family that's just trying to build a resort and make $1 billion off the arena.
Yeah.
So that's the other way this could go.
Could you imagine if Henry it traded Mookie and Tatum under his watch?
Whew. And the other part of that is LeBron would be in the ownership group.
That's funny. That's funny.
So I don't know. It's definitely one you have to think about because it's the most obvious. They're looking to get into the NBA. This is an NBA team becoming available in their backyard. I just wonder about the cost. Do you think Vegas, given the expansion fee and all the costs associated with starting that up, would be more expensive, or the Celtics, who are obviously a top 5 valuable team and have these massive costs associated with them? I think that's going to be a big part of the question too, because if you're Henry and them, you buy the cheaper team, right? The better value purchase in that scenario. So it's probably going to be pretty close. I don't know what the expansion fee is going to be like, but it's probably going to be ridiculous.
Yeah. And again, just to clarify from that statement here, Boston Basketball Partners L.L.C includes Wick, and Irv and Pags and the Abbey Group, which is Epstein, Robert Epstein, and then also Paul Edgerly, Glenn Hutchins, James Pilata, and a couple of others, managing directors, guys over at Bain Capital. That's the whole shebang. That's that. It's not just Wick. It's Wick and Boston Basketball LLC here. So it would be a complete overhaul of ownership here, and a completely new group coming in, saying that. So yeah, I mean, people are throwing out some crazy nefarious names. I don't know whether someone joked LIV Celtics. I don't think that that's something the NBA will allow at this time. Saudi ownership. Someone mentioned Musk. Does Bezos own anything basketball related?
No, and I think he's looked into that at different points. So that would be interesting. Obviously, there's the prospect of Seattle expansion as well, right? So that would probably make more sense in his case
Yeah.
later this decade. So I probably would rule him out, but it's one of a short list of names. There's not many here that can purchase this team. So I guess add him to the list too. I
Everyone's
won't get
throwing
into
this
that.
out.
I won't get into that.
It's interesting. It's interesting how this works. And again, I will
Electric
jump back.
bike watch.
We'll jump back to this, later in the show, and certainly if any kind of new insights or anything become available, I'm curious how long Wick
He'll
has
probably
known
hold a
this.
press conference, right? I'd imagine.
I guess, I mean, if they're putting out a statement, this thing was in the works. This isn't something he just decided to do now. So it is interesting that happened the way it happened. And the timing of it, particularly off the heels of the Derrick White announcement, because again, I don't know that anybody was concerned that the Derrick White deal wasn't going to get done because the Celtics weren't going to offer that money. I think if there was any concern, it was simply because White might not take it. So the fact that he is, I think, was amazing. But it is just super interesting that, right off the bat, as soon as that happens, bang, this gets announced here. So it's pretty crazy. We'll get into the White stuff in a little bit. As I said, we'll continue talking here. Tell you real quick, Prize Picks. NBA season might be over, but America's #1 fantasy sports app is still cooking, and there's a lot of things you can get in on here. If you want to get involved with Prize Picks, you can see the offer on the screen. Deposit. If you deposit 100, you get a deposit match up to 100, which is great. WNBA action rolling right now. Really fun and exciting stuff. You can get involved with that. Baseball, all you have to do, pick a 2 or more stats, some of your favorite players, the action that you're watching that night. You could win up to 100 times your money here with as few as 4 correct picks. You pick anywhere from 2 to 6 players. You pick more or less on a particular stat, and that's all you have to do. A lot of other fun features that you can take part in here with Prize Picks, and as we said, it's right there for you. 100% deposit match up to 100 when you use that code CLNS. Also, Game Time. Again, NBA is season is over, but with this authorized ticket app, you can get into any game in town, any concert, really any hot ticket. And there's a lot of cool things happening right now in and around Boston. Especially the Red Sox, who are playing some really good ball, and those tickets are getting harder and harder to come by. So if you want to use Game Time, go in there. The price goes down the closer you get to the actual game. You get really cool features, flash sales, zone deals, also a panoramic view of your seat, so you know exactly what it is you're going to look like. That's my favorite feature by far. I love that. I love that you see exactly what it looks like, because sometimes you get stuck
Especially
there. You
for
got to
baseball.
Google. You got to Google, like, rate my seat, sometimes when you're going in to buy, tickets other places, and where is it? And from concert view, am I going to be obscured, side stage, this and that, and it's really, really cool that you see exactly what it's going to look like from your seat with that panoramic view. I mean, is there going to be an overhang? It's really, really, really a cool feature that they have. You don't see anywhere else. So again, download the Game Time app. Code CLNS, $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Use that Game Time app. Downloaded. Code CLNS, 20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Let's jump into the other breaking news of the day, which is less explosive, but more.
From Himmel's back, just to wrap this up real quick. He says, despite the release saying the ownership group intends to sell all of the shares of the team, that's just procedure, and some current members of ownership are still expected to ultimately stay on. So
Okay.
we'll see what happens there.
Okay, that's interesting. So there's a clarification there. I didn't want to say the report initially from Adam Himmelsbach of the Globe, because he had put out there it was really only Wick who was out, not the entire group. And then the Celtics sent out that statement saying that the entire group, which does include some of those other people there, And maybe as Himmelsbach just said, it's procedural, and Pags or Bain or other people involved in that group there. I know Pags was former Bain Capital there, and there's a couple other people. You never know what gets involved with those guys. Pags has some pretty deep pockets too. You could see him wanting to hang around and be there. So who knows what his intention is. And I'm not sure whether or not they can form another type of LLC where they just replace Wick and bring in someone else with some money and create their own sort of group where Wick's no longer part of it, partnering with other people and create an extension of what the current ownership group is. I guess that's possible if they did want to stay on, and maybe it's driven by Pags. But I don't know. I mean, this is all speculative at this point, but as information comes out, we'll keep updating. Anybody in the chat sees anything they want to throw out there that they think is worth talking about, let's do it. Meantime, as we said, the other stuff here we wanted to talk about was Derrick White. Crazy that this happened here. We were talking about it, whether he would take it. It's $31 million. I thought it, as his agent, I would have advised him not to, but I thought he might, and he did. So what was your reaction, Bobby?
Thrilled. How can he not be? This is a monumental break for the Celtics here, that they don't have to go through free agency with him, that they don't have to potentially
incredible
lose him
deal
here, and that they keep him at this price, which seemed borderline unthinkable after what he's produced over the last 2 years. And we threw out those scenarios, John, where he just wants to stay in Boston, or he wants to give the team a break to keep everybody around, or he just wants this kind of security. Whatever reason it was, he just went ahead and did it. And that seems rare in the league now, especially when you look at what some of these other guys are signing for. It's all upward of 200 million for guys in this class, and you're keeping him for 60, 70, 80 million less than that. There's a scenario obviously here where he pushed it up to 175 and you just can't do it. And he would have been the first guy to break off from this group here. And he, I think, is the most important outside of Brown and Tatum to keep with this group, because he's the connector. He's the glue guy. He's the one that can do the most array of things on this roster outside of those two guys. And when he's
also
out,
a little younger,
they felt the biggest loss.
A little younger than the other three core guys. He's about to turn 30, as opposed to Holiday, who's going to be 34 next season. I mean, Porzingis is at that age too, but you've got the injury risk and obviously Al Horford. So you're locking him up here for prime years of his career, as he's really kind of come into his own and entered his prime here. You're getting, top level Derrick White, which is amazing.
Yes. And as I look at it here for the 2026 cap, that's a 8th guy added to the mix, depending on what this catered deal ends up being. But it's going to be Tatum at like 54. It's going to be Brown at 53, Holiday at 32, Porzingis 30, and White about 28 in the first year of his extension, with Pritchard at 7. So you throw Hauser into that mix at 10-ish with a repeater tax set to begin that year. And you're talking 220-ish million in salary just between those 8 guys, and 200 in tax with the repeater. So that's where you hit that massive tax wall if you're this team here. And it's going to, I think, make that Hauser negotiation a little bit more complicated. But as we talked about, John, their strategy seems to be keep all these guys under contract, have the flexibility to move them, don't lose them for nothing, and figure it out in a year or two here. So I think that's pretty prudent. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's the best way to keep the team sustainable into the future. But this is why Wick's selling the team here. The cost of this roster
is astronomical, and every dollar is basically like $7 now, which is just crazy. It's just, it's so expensive right now. So yeah, but it's pretty incredible that they're able to do this. Cause again, I mean, it's not just, something's going to have to happen, but I mean, how many teams right now are scrambling to try to lock in some long-term assets here to be able to compete with the Celtics, who ran way ahead of the pack here, made their 2 trades, extended both guys, and now you've got your core 5 members locked up. Once you sign the Tatum extension, which it's expensive as hell, and that second apron is going to be really hard to team build. But
Do you want a number
on what it costs? It's $400 million, right?
483 million.
483.
Yeah, just off what they have right now for 26.
483 for next year?
For 26, yeah.
For 26. Okay,
right,
we're still
so
not
2
there
years.
Yet. When the Tatum extension kicks in.
Yeah,
the
this year is going to
26
be
season.
This year is going to be like 270. But just think of that, going from non-repeater to repeater with a couple extensions. Obviously, Tatum is the big one there.
2 trade deadlines ago, Wick was trying to stay under a line to get that kickback, right? For every team that didn't go over it, you got the $10 million kickback. And that's what he was doing. We're scraping bottom of the barrel here to get a refund, a rebate from the NBA for being under that. But now, exactly, 400 million plus, that's insane. So you're dropping that on somebody else, which is crazy, but that's gonna happen. That's what's gonna happen. You're talking about exactly, a payroll that's gonna exceed 200 something million, but you're gonna pay almost twice that in the tax, which is bananas.
So I would have to think at that point, you're probably either gonna look to move Porzingis as an expiring at that point, or let that expire when it happens after that season. And potentially, obviously, it's going to depend on the value of all these guys. But if Holiday's still a valuable piece at that point who can really bolster another team, you just try to sell high on all of that money and try to take as little money back for that as possible. And, is that picks at that point or young players who don't make much money? I think that's going to be the way you try to navigate this. And Brown, Tatum, and White here to bargain contract effectively, I think, are going to be the core guys into the future who stick around here. But who knows? Maybe something changes and it's going to take one of those core guys to be able to make this more sustainable. There's a lot that can happen. But what's clear is that 480 million, depending on what the ownership situation is at that point, that should even Warriors owner Lakeup with all those revenue streams and Ballmer with the Clippers and the Nets ownership group there, they didn't want to keep paying that kind of money. So certainly, given the revenue limitations of the Celtics team, they're not going to want to pay that money for very long anyway. Maybe you do it for that 1 year in 26 if you're trying to three-peat. But there's going to be some off-ramps. And to me, John, you keep Tatum and Brown at all costs, and everyone else is going to be on the table in terms of reducing costs at that point.
I mean, it's very possible, and it's very possible. And honestly, I think it's likely that your core is Tatum, White, and Brown, and that Holiday and Porzingis, as they get later into those deals, you're going to try to move and you're going to take the losses. That makes most sense, but also you're going to get less return. So you'll be taking on bad. You're either going to trade an expiring or you're going to trade someone to a contender and take a step backwards while you are still contending. It's hard to get off those deals if they're still playing at a decent level and you're competitive, because you're not going to sell now. But realistically, if you want to sell high or get any return, you have to trade them when they're playing well to someone who needs somebody like that. Make yourself worse, make them better for future financial relief. So it's not a fun problem to have in that regard.
That's the killer to me in this Porzingis injury. I know everyone's looking at it and saying, oh, he'll be back. It's fine, whatever. You have a limited time with this core together, all these pieces together where they're playing at the top of their games. And for him to be hampered to this extent by that injury into year one of his extension, you only have 2 years with him here on this extension. Is most of this year 1 out of 2, going to be spent rehabbing and recovering and managing, returning from that injury? That's not great. And so that's why I looked at that injury and was like, this is really bad. Beyond the fact that it's just a greater difficulty for this team trying to repeat. So that's a killer there that you invested in these 6 guys, and one of them already is hurt to the extent that he is through 2 years. You got your championship, obviously, and he played a part in that. But it stinks because you want him out there. You just want him out there. That's all it's about. And he's not going to be out there for a big part of next season, which is a killer. But this deal with White, you should be doing backflips down the street about that. That is outstanding.
I mean, again, you're seeing the role player money being given around, and you're going to tell me you want to make arguments for Bridges. Yeah, there's some things that Bridges can do that White can't, but there's certainly plenty of things White does that Bridges doesn't, and he's also just one of the most complete basketball players in the NBA in terms of, him being next to perfect and almost always doing the right thing and playing, on both ends the way that he does. He's just been such a gem for them in terms of value to the franchise and to this team and to this group of players. I mean, White is just pivotal. So this is an incredible deal for the Celtics here. And it's also just amazing as we looked at, what they have coming back. It's all of it. It's all of it. Like the whole team is coming back here. And you've got everyone else kind of jumping around, trying to catch them. And, among the things that happened, Paul George, this happened overnight, and it's definitely worth talking about. Paul George to Philly. I mean, you look at what happened here to the Knicks. They signed, hold on one second. They signed, they traded for Bridges, gave up a lot of capital. But between that and OG extension, they put themselves in a position where they couldn't bring back Hartenstein. The interesting thing here is Hartenstein to me was the scariest thing about facing the Knicks in that Eastern Conference Finals. Just because of I thought the only way that team could beat the Celtics was if they just destroyed them on the glass. And that's what I was worried that he was going to do. The collection of talent is outstanding. I like Brunson a lot. I like Bridges a lot. I like OG. OG's a terrific defensive player. It's a really good team. But with OG being out, no Randall, I thought Hartenstein was the one thing that could maybe make that competitive, given how depleted that Knicks team was going to be. So, just looking at, what we have here, in terms of this, let's look at these, things with over the Sixers. Here's what you might be looking at as a starting lineup. Maybe it's Batum instead of Oubre in there, but that's what you've got.
Batum's gone. I think that was reported.
Oh, he's gone. Okay. Versus that, I mean, yeah, look, it's a good big three. You're still chasing a little bit if you're the Sixers. I think people aren't fully understanding how far ahead of the rest of the pack the Celtics were last year, because you're only looking at the playoffs and the injuries and what those teams looked like and saying, well, if they weren't hurt, these teams were 14. And again, Embiid missed a lot of time. The entire East was 14 games worse than the Celtics. So let's not be stupid. Celtics were a clear level above everybody, but yes, this tightens the gap.
Yeah, I'll put them third, Philly, in that hierarchy. Obviously,
I still think I got New York ahead of them. Yeah.
I mean, how can you not when, as you show there, Lowry and Oubre would be in the starting lineup or whatever it would be. I know they brought in Eric Gordon on a minimum. So it's probably that big three and a bunch of minimum guys. And Andre Drummond joined the group too there to back up Embiid, which is a pretty good move. So I don't think there's enough depth there to make them scarier than the Knicks. But if they start to fill it out, somehow they bring Melton back and maybe they trade Paul Reed, who makes about $7 million for a wing piece or something like that. I think then you move them up to 2. Obviously, Embiid as a single force is the scariest thing outside of the Giannis factor in Milwaukee there in the East. And I think if he's going full go with that roster, they become number 2 at that point. But you just have too many questions here. The depth, George, as he continues to age here, what's he going to look like? And is Embiid even healthy in the playoffs, which he hasn't been ever. So that's why I put them behind the Knicks for now. There's a chance that they could rise above the Knicks as the biggest threat to Boston in the East. And again, they played Boston, I think, tougher than anyone in the East. Nick Nurse's coaching, Embiid, the level he was playing at early in the season, the runaway MVP before the injury. So that's a group to watch if they can stay healthy and George plays at the level he can there. George is so tough to gauge at this point, isn't he, John? Just because he was so buried in that role in LA where he's mostly just standing in the corner. And then when Kawhi gets hurt that year, they go to the East Finals. You start to see, oh, that's that's an MVP level guy. George is when he's in control of the offense and doing a lot of stuff. 2021, he was 23, 6, and 5. Last year, he's 22, 5, and 3, and he's 34 this year. So you don't look at him and say, oh, geez, this is the guy that can stop Tatum and Brown. First and foremost, they don't have the defenders to do that on the wing as the roster stands right now. And he's a pretty diminished version of who he used to be. So, yeah, this is way better than Tobias Harris and what they were doing before, and it brings them a little closer. I mentioned on my hit earlier, John, that this just reduces the margin for error for the Celtics. Porzingis is out. That takes a little hit on their advantage in the East. Another guy goes out. All of a sudden, Philly and New York are in position to strike. But you are still, I think, head and shoulders above Philly and a pretty substantial level above New York here.
Paul George was almost a 50-40-90 guy last year. His shot,
he's a very efficient scorer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he shot, he's lifetime almost. He's like 39% lifetime from three. We saw the catch and shoot numbers after Stephen A's ridiculous proclamation that he can't do it, and how good he is at that. So a ton of spacing and a real offensive threat. Obviously, he's not going to be able to lock down, a Tatum or a Brown defensively. As a younger version might have been more competitive in that regard. But I mean, it's a guy who's really, 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 I mean, a borderline top 10 talent, who's kind of had to play a secondary role, in his current home, and also just you're muted, Bobby. Just the compliment of the point. I mean, if you look at when we used to have the Tatum Brown conversations, a lot of the conversation was around the redundancy of having your best player at the same exact position and whether you were getting the most out of the two of them when they were both on the floor together, hence the whole can they play together thing. It wasn't whether they can play together. It's just simply you didn't have the playmaking point guard or distributor or a big that you could take a little bit off of them. And then you saw how much was unlocked when you brought a Porzingis into it and what that did for those guys. The good thing about Philly is you're looking at point guard, wing, and big as your top three players. So it is fairly spread out there in terms of where you're getting the contributions. So George is going to get to do all of it in this destination. It's a good spot. So I think they're legit. I mean, I also like seeing some talent come back east, which isn't the worst thing in the world, because I was getting really tired of the West Coast dominance. And look, you're a Celtics fan. What do you want for real? Do you want to win the East by 15 games and then have a run through here? Or you want to, I'm not saying earn it, but it's fun. Competition is fun. East Coast basketball, when the East Coast is rocking, Bobby, it's the best. If the best three teams in the East right now are Philly, New York, and Boston, it's going to be an awesome NBA season. So I like it for that sake. Does it make them better? Yeah. Is it better than the Celtics? No, not with a healthy Porzingis, I don't think, but it's really cool. I think it's neat.
And think about the teams you missed out on playing last year. And no knock on Indy, who's great and is still a factor here. We got to mention them alongside any of these teams, especially since they can continue to go and make additions. So they're above Cleveland in my mind. They're right there with Milwaukee, if not above them in my mind, considering what Milwaukee looked like last year below Giannis. And they should be right on par with Philly as Philly stands. So you can't ignore them either. You played them. They were tough. You ended up sweeping them. Cleveland, they're tough, but you pretty much rolled through them. And then in round one, you faced a pretty diminished Heat team. So you didn't play Milwaukee, that crazy matchup from 2022 that gave you a lot of trouble. You didn't play New York, which would have been a really intriguing East Finals at full health. And you didn't play Philly, with Embiid in position, who looked like a real power early in the season under that new coach. So you theoretically, John, could have to play Indy round 1 or Philly round 2, and then it might be that New York, Milwaukee style East Conference Finals last year. So that's not to knock the path that they went through last year, because it wasn't the easiest path ever. I'm still not buying that, but it wasn't New York, Philly, Milwaukee, like that murderer's row, that kind of team that you played in the 2022 run to go to the finals. So that's what you could be looking at here if everybody stays healthy. And that's obviously a big if. This is an older Philly roster at its core. That's an older Milwaukee roster at its core. So that stuff could still happen to those teams. But don't you look at it right now, John, and say, it's going to be a tougher road to the finals for Boston this year?
It is. Everyone's talking about Porzingis' health. I have zero faith in Embiid staying healthy. Zero. And it's not it's not just based on history. It's just simply a guy that big and at that size is a walking injury waiting to happen simply for the stress that he puts on his feet, his back, his knees, all his joints. It's really difficult for someone like that to stay healthy for an entire season, and especially the load that they put on him and the expectation and what he's got to do and how he has to play and how he has to bang and physical. And, even the flopping takes its physical toll, the amount of times that guy hits the ground. It's just a lot. And on the wrong side of 30, I think you're going to see diminished versions of Embiid going forward, unless something happens. And I always say, a lot of these guys just need to go on a Tom Brady diet and lean up, get crazy, look towards fitness being the only thing that's going to keep me.
Look at Horford.
It's hailing here. It's bouncing off the side here.
Oh, now you're looking out the window.
Big, but I'm not doing it. Big balls of hail. Holy crap.
I really wasn't on. I was like, whoa. But here's a question for you, John. Is this scarier or less scary than some of the alternative options for Philly? Because you obviously heard about Jimmy Butler being an option there.
George is better than. Look, it's Butler's Butler. He's great.
He's an injury risk too, obviously, though.
I think it's a tie. Butler's am I interested risk? Like I said, Butler's one of those guys who has, the expiration label on him, 2, 3, 4 years before he starts.
You're putting Miami on that
shit,
short list if he could stay healthy, right? But you just have no faith in him staying healthy.
I don't have no faith in Butler staying healthy, but I think Butler with Philly would have been pretty scary too. I think people are underselling how good Paul George is. He's he's an MVP level talent. Is
he close to Brown or Tatum though?
Yes, of course he is. He's so good, and it's not at this point. He had an extremely good year and an efficient year. He's really, really good, and I think yes, very much in that class. I think people will be like, "Are you crazy?" Paul George is an outstanding player. Maybe 3 years from now, when he's 35, 36, 30, when he's 37, you're having a different convo. But I have no reason to believe you're seeing a different version of George. And he played last year. Kawhi was hurt. George played a lot more than that. And George, but yeah, he's an injury risk too. There's no question about it. I just think a healthy Paul George is an extremely good player. People aren't necessarily taking into consideration. And yeah, you want to talk about injuries, that's fine. He played 74 games this year. He did have a stretch of time where he was hurt, but he also played, let's go through his entire career, 79, 80, he was hurt in 15 with a gruesome injury, but 81, 75, 79, 77, you have the pandemic reduced years there where he was 48 and 54, missed time in 22, played 56 games 2 years ago, 74 the year before. It's not an always injured guy, but it's a guy who had a bad string of injuries and a bad string there. But again, 74 games last year, played in the postseason, and they reached, as you said, they reached the conference finals the year that Kawhi was hurt. He can carry a team. He's excellent. He's excellent. I might say, yeah.
We have some other breaking news across the league. Not hugely impactful to Boston, but Klay Thompson
Clay.
expected
Yeah.
to go to Dallas and join Luka and Kyrie.
Yeah.
So interesting move there at the very least. He replaces Derrick Jones Jr. in that starting lineup, which, despite Klay's injuries and such, an upgrade, I'd say, on the offensive end at the very least. He still shot 39% on like 8 threes a game last year. And that is the one thing I'll say with George. If Philly wants to say, we got to get our 40, 50 threes to fight with the Celtics, he's a pretty good guy to get up 9, 10 a game and hit them at a high rate.
If he can still do it. If he can still do
I'm
it.
talking George. Klay, bigger question.
Clay. Yeah, I don't know what that does.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of Klay is a terrific fit in Dallas. And yes, you said over Herb Jones. Yeah, sign me up. But like Derrick Jones, right. But Klay, as we knew him, is not Klay anymore.
The inconsistency is massive there. And he had scored 0 points in his last game with the Warriors, right? Which was pretty unbelievable. But at his best, he does still show those shades of Thompson. And George, keep going back and forth a little bit, but George, to me, much closer to his prime, as you mentioned, still. But I do think he's lost a little something, just a little bit. He's not an MVP candidate anymore, I don't think. He's not a guy that can score upward of 28 points a game. Maybe he is. Maybe he'll surprise people this year with how much freedom Philly gives him. And that's the big question, John, right? How much is Philly going to allow him to do with the ball in his hands? How much offensive facilitation is he doing? Or is he just standing off to the side watching Embiid run the whole show the entire night? That's going to be the key for them trying to make this work, is having some balance offensively. And I think that's key to keeping Embiid healthy a little bit too. I mean, the load he takes on these last couple of years is otherworldly. It's like he's Harden or something with how much he has the ball there the last handful of years. So you have Maxey, who can take some of that pressure off you. You have George to take some of that pressure off you. The defense there is intriguing to me too. Nurse is so good on that end. George is a long, impactful defender. Maybe didn't show it at his potential there in LA. If Nurse can really get the best out of George, Embiid, try to get some other wings in there, and they really do need some additional wing help. So that's why I'm still looking at how this roster is going to come together around this big three here. They could be a threat to Boston. I mean, if you're doing your short list of teams that are a threat to Boston, it's New York, it's Milwaukee because of the offensive firepower they have to fight with you. Philly, they showed it last year. They were one of the toughest teams you played. And then who are your two other teams? I'm going Oklahoma City.
Well, I mean, I'm not even dealing with the West because, again, that's I didn't deal with the West all year. I think people fixated on Denver all year long, and that was the reason they thought the Celtics couldn't win a championship. And I thought that was a silly thing to do. You never know who comes out. It doesn't really matter. You're really only concerned with the East, and when you get there, you get there. OKC, absolutely. I think they're in great shape right now with the moves that they've made. So they look like the team to beat. Denver going backwards because you just lost KCP and you're, so yes.
They might not be in that top 5 anymore.
Well, they are. I think there's a little recency bias there with watching them go out, but losing KCP really hurts them for sure there. But I'm not worried about the West at all. I only look at the East. Orlando's on the rise.
Okay, so who's your top 5 in the East?
I mean, I think
3, let's say.
I think it's the obvious, and I'll put 5 in as Miami. But certainly, you have the Celtics, Knicks, Bucks, and and Sixers in different order. I might go Knicks 2, Sixers 3, Bucks 4, but I think it's actually pretty close 2 through 4 with the Celtics still a healthy Celtics team still.
Is Indy on the list?
A bit above them. Indy's gonna be right there in the mix, dangerous, but I don't think that they've got the horses yet to compete with those big boys. I like Miami, I like Orlando. It's a lot of the teams that kind of made it last year. It's funny, like you talk about Cleveland, like I don't know where they fit in, but like I can't imagine. I think it's fair to say, Bobby, that right now the Celtics are flat out running it back. The Knicks, probably Orlando, probably and Philadelphia are all going to be better next year. I don't know who else sneaks in from the outside in. I think the 8 that made the playoffs are certainly the 8 you're looking at. Could one or two teams surprise you and fall a little lower than you think or rise? Yeah, it's possible. I don't know that anybody rises to the level of the Celtics healthy yet, but that first couple of months are going to be interesting because you're going to be shorthanded, and you suffer one more injury to another player that keeps them out for a little bit of time. Yeah, Celtics could take a couple of lumps early in the season, but it's competitive. It'll be more competitive.
Yeah, health is everything here, obviously, and I think that includes Boston. They were able to sustain some injuries last year. I still think they'll do a pretty good job with that this year, but Porzingis is out for so long that an additional injury during that stretch could put you in a very difficult position. And so it's going to be important for some of these younger guys on the roster to be able to step in and contribute. Keita stays, which is next to Wick selling the team and Derrick White extending a smaller headline, but an important one. They're keeping him on a long-term deal. He's going to be in that mix of guys who help back up Porzingis next year. And if they don't add to that front court, they still have 2 open roster spots, and Tillman and Brissett are still out there. But Cade is moving up that hierarchy into next year. So
yeah,
some real opportunity for him to step in and do some stuff at the start of next year, which I think is exciting for some people. I know you're one of the guys who's higher on him, John. I know Gary, who we had on here a week or two ago, is pretty high on him. I know the
I'm
fans
high on
seem
the
pretty
potential.
high on him too.
I'm high on the potential because I think, like I said, I always use the Rob comparison, not because I'm comparing him to Rob, but the reason I liked Rob as much as I did was we focusing less on what they can't do and whether or not some of their skills rise to the level of elite. And I think Keita can do a couple of things at a really high level. The offensive rebounding and the putbacks, and again, we've seen the importance of that, saves you from some bad possessions and offensive stagnation at times. And it's just a really good thing to have when you have it. Rob, we spent all of this time looking at Rob and being like, man, when he's out there, the offense, because of the shooting and this and that, and you can't, you're so worried about you don't have enough shooters on the floor, and like I don't know if you can have them out there. And then you'd look at the numbers, and the offensive rating would be like 20 points better with Williams on the floor because of the gravity and the lob threat and all of the things that he would bring. So sometimes it's not arriving at your destination the way you expected, but you're still getting there. And someone like Keita might be able to provide you something that's different. Than what the traditional style of play that Celtics is under Joe Mazzulla, but that might be useful. So I like him. I like the potential. I want to see where his growth is. And you need cheap players. Like, you want to be able to pay backups a couple $1 million, and you're going to need players
to
like
at this point.
You really have to. So you need your rookies. You need Keita. You need Jordan Walsh. You need those guys to be at least 9, 10, 11 playable, if not bumping up that depth chart at some point or another would be ideal. And being your role players or your bench players is great because you can't be paying mid-levels and $25 million and $30 million to guys coming in off the bench there to round things out. You're going to have to find a way to get cheaper and better. And I like the Keita costs you nothing, for next year, which is great.
Yeah, and what a find. And they got lucky, right? Because the Kings waived him. They invested in him a couple of years after bringing him in the draft. And he looked like an exciting piece for them. And then they just cut him for JaVale McGee, which was really weird. And then the Celtics signed him for a 2-way. So that was a great find. And I was pretty excited when they signed him because that's a guy you saw out there at Summer League his first 2 years and stood out. Obviously, the 7-foot stature, the frame, but he would dominate out there in Vegas. And then he was the G League MVP runner-up, I think, the year after that. So this was a great find. Is there Rob potential? Probably not to that extent, but is there high level backup potential here? That seems to be the case. And he's, what do you always say, John, the 4A? Because he's way too good for the G League, but still not quite there at the NBA level. But he gave you those couple weeks last year where he was pretty good in a full backup role. So can you build on that if you're him? Can you have a big first month or two here if you're him while you're in that position? Right now, he's your third center, John. So,
He is.
get ready. Get ready, Katie.
He
You're gonna get called on early and often if this is the front court, and we'll see what
Yeah, he's
happens.
gonna
Still
play.
not a ton of noise on Tillman. I was going through some of the teams yesterday. Could a Memphis return make sense for him? I know they brought in Edey. They still have some money to spend out there. New Orleans doesn't have a center at all right now, with Valanciunas going to Washington, which was a weird one.
Yeah.
So they're probably in that mix. He could help them a little bit.
Signings like that always blow my mind. I'm like, what are you signing?
That blew my mind.
It's so weird to me. Yeah.
I mean, the thing with a team like that is you have to sign someone. So
Yeah.
I guess they chose Valanciunas.
Yeah. Is this still go? No, we don't have. Are we doing this code? Yeah.
Try it.
I'm sipping out of my Garden Report because the third center made me think about it. I'm sipping out of my Garden Report mug, which you can absolutely get on our merch store. But go to shop.clnsmedia.com. Use the code SUMMER24, 20% off here throughout the summer if you want to get in on some of our fine stuff. And as we know, Jimmy Toscano has this thing loaded with some cool merch, including the hard hats and the name drop t-shirt and a bunch of different things. So again, shop.clnsmedia.com. Go check it out. Lots of fun stuff. Honestly, I was blown away by the amount of sales that we had through the playoff run and the finals and the parade and this and that. It was really fun seeing people out there, which was great. So check it out if you want to get there. CLNSmedia.com. The majority of the money goes in Jimmy Toscano's pocket. I'll just let you guys know that. So that's well, that's not true, but yes. Thanks to Jimmy for taking the lead on this stuff.
So it looks like that Clay deal could be a sign and trade. All the details are starting to come out. 3-year deal, $50 million. Josh Green goes to Charlotte in the deal. So we'll see what Charlotte's sending out there. Yeah,
less than the Celtics, less than the Warriors had offered, according to Woj. There was state tax implications and wanting to go somewhere where he thought he had a better chance of winning a title. So a little bit of shade there in terms of at least the reporting of that. Batum, as you said, gone. 2-year, $10.6 million goes to the Clips. So he's out. And that's it. As you said, Josh Green to Charlotte there in the Clay deal. Agent Greg Lawrence. I'm reading the Woj tweet. Thompson had 4 years for more money, taking less, chance to win a championship and the state tax situation. Yep.
So they have Kyrie, Luka, Clay, Najee Marshall came in yesterday, who's a decent 3-and-D wing from New Orleans. And PJ Washington's still there. Gafford's still there. Lively's still there. Obviously, the Mavs caught their own breaks on the way to the finals. But that's looking like a team that could be back in that position next year. At least have as good of a chance as anyone else out there. And you have to think Luke is going to be motivated. Do you see Luka's playing in Europe right now, by the way? That's pretty surprising.
He was playing a tune-up for Slovenia the other day. I saw. So yeah, I mean,
I thought he was battered in those finals.
Such bullshit. I said that from the get-go, Bobby. I'm like, give me a break that Luka's injured. Like, he's freaking fine. So yeah, he's out there playing. I wouldn't love it if I'm Dallas. You know these guys, these European guys. I mean, they will not sit out these international competitions unless they need surgery that's going to keep them out for 6 months. It pains them to miss.
Yeah, Giannis is playing for Greece, right?
Yeah, the entire nation looks to these guys so heavily. And like Luka doesn't play, so it's like basically just shutting down the program. So like you can't not do it if you're him and the national pride there and these guys.
I'm pretty bummed Porzingis can't go for live because they were going to be in the Olympics, which is a big bummer there. But he was obviously way too hurt to do that. So the Olympics are going to be fun. August or late July, August. So we're about a month away from that.
Yeah, it's always fun. And it's the international competition is so good now. You've got some really good talent on Canada. and several Celtics there, which should be a ton of fun. But anyway, let's wrap it up here, Bobby. As we said, we'll rifle through some of our breaking news as it came. The first thing that happened was Derrick White signed a 4-year, $125.9 million extension. We thought the entire show was going to be on that. We actually spent probably the least amount of time on it, but it's the best news of the day. That Derrick White signed. He took that team-friendly deal. I think he left a fair amount of money on the table if he wanted to stick it out and play one more year. So this is legit. I mean, it's a lot of money, but well worth it. And a hometown discount is a lot of money when you add it up with all the rest of the money they're spending. But this is a legit hometown discount that Derrick White came. So I'm putting it on you people out there. You guys made this happen. Derrick White loves you, and he loves being here, and he loves being in Boston. And you love when athletes do this because it doesn't always work this way, and it doesn't work both ways. You've seen franchises show people the door who really, really, really wanted to be here. It is nice.
He has truly become an all-time beloved Celtic. You think of his Game 6 moment, the consistency, the ceiling raiser he became. I was going back watching some old Garden reports the other night, John, and just some of the freakouts we had 2022. His arrival his arrival changed everything in many ways that year. It shifted them from that maddening inconsistency to a bona fide contender when he arrived. And they've been to 3 straight East Finals and 2 NBA Finals with him here. So amazing, an all-time role player, really, in Boston. He's become here, and he just gets better every year too. There's a real work ethic that's pretty obvious from his standpoint too. And he's just falling in love with the city. So it's awesome. I think this is something people can be really excited about and try to put some of the Wick stuff to the side.
Yeah, so that was the other major news here. As we said, well, we'll even start at the beginning of the day. As we had mentioned, Paul George overnight agreed to that deal with the Sixers. We did think that was likely to happen. Other things that happened, Mavericks, as we mentioned, signed Klay Thompson to a 3-year, $50 million deal. So he's leaving Golden State after a terrific run there. Isaiah Hartenstein, 3-year, $87 million deal with OKC. OKC really starting to look like they might be the team to beat in the West next year with what they've done. And then the bombshell news here with the Celtics ownership group led by Wyc Grousbeck planning to make the team available for sale. By the end of this year, Wyc Grousbeck would remain on as the governor up until 28, whenever it would pass on to the next group, but the sale expected to be finalized this year. Doesn't mean everyone is gone. There's some reported interest from some of the other members of Boston Basketball LLC, namely Steve Paliuca, to remain on in some capacity. So we'll see how that goes. It's going to be interesting.
I'll ask you this, John.
Yeah.
What's your lasting memory of Grousbeck's ownership tenure? How are you going to remember him?
I mean, it's impossible not to remember it for now, because this was that all-in push that we were concerned that he wouldn't make, based on being, it's so weird to say, one of the poorer owners for a person who's got, $500 million in net worth outside of the franchise. But it has to be that commitment here to pushing in here. I'm not an owner guy. I don't think they deserve tons of credit. I think they can get in the way way more often than they can do positive things. I think they should be a blank checkbook, and whoever they hire to make decisions, they should just let them make the decisions. And if you don't like the decisions they make, bring someone else to make decisions. But I don't think an owner should be part of the conversation in sports at all, unless they're bad. So to me, it's just don't mess it up. I bought it. Other people run and manage it. I'm just here off to the side. So, but I will give credit because he could have gone the bad route of that. And you do like the people who are fans first, because you feel like they feel what you feel. And it isn't just a vanity that you can tell your rich friends at the yacht club, oh, I want a title. You're more part of the fabric of the community. So I think that along with, kind of opening up the checkbook here and letting these guys go after it with this team was great. So that's what I will say. But I don't have I don't mean to be.
Well, I was gonna point towards.
I don't mean to be a jerk about it. I'm not. it drives me nuts that the owners talk first after a championship, or that they take credit for things like.
No, it's a fair
No,
point. I think the
I
one thing
hate
you can
that.
mention with him
Like,
that was pretty
no,
important.
everyone else did it, but yeah.
I think the one thing you can mention with him that was pretty important and that persisted through almost the entirety of the time he was here was bringing in Danny. That kind of coincided with him buying the team, right? And then Ainge brings in KG and Pierce, and then Ainge is here for the Tatum and Brown drafts and the KG and Pierce trades. So to talk about what you mentioned there, bringing in the right guy and letting him make the decisions, bringing in Danny to lead the team was about as good of a decision as you can make.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said, those are the big decisions here, but like some stuff was questioned, like what we thought firing Brad up in a money-saving move when he clearly didn't want to be the, anymore. We weren't sure that was going to work. That could have been atrocious. The Ime Udoka situation was weird, but it ended up working out because Missoula ended up being great for this team and they won a title. So you don't really know, but yeah, obviously those personnel decisions at the top are the ones that matter most. And really he's had his hand in 3 major decisions, and that would be Danny. That would be the situation that happened there with Brad, which was good because Brad ended up being good and Udoka was a terrific coach in that first year. How that situation was handled, and now it not really mattering anymore because where they ended up being better. And then that last thing was opening that checkbook up there and getting it done. But yeah, I mean, yeah, he presided over 2008, but Danny made those moves. As I said, is hiring the right person matters, and he did twice. And that's short of opening up the checkbook, the most important thing you're going to do is make sure you put the right person in charge, and he's done it twice now. So that's a big deal.
Yeah. So we'll see. Will he talk in the near future here about that decision to move on? Will we get a White press conference? I'd assume we might, just given how exciting that is. And that'll probably all come in time. And was it July 9th? They can start negotiating with Hauser, I believe.
6th, I thought, but maybe it's 9th.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah.
Some in
I
that
thought
range.
I thought it was 1 week from the time it opened, but maybe not.
That
but
makes
yeah.
sense. So I'm sure we'll get a Hauser news in a week here. So because that just seems to be kind of in the bag at this point with how much they want to get that done. And I'm sure Hauser's in a similar place to where White is here, where he just wants to be part of this, wants a little long-term security, and all of a sudden your top 6, 7 are intact in the near future. And I'm sure Horford's going to kind of just be a year-by-year thing at this point.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe he comes back at a minimum if he comes back again.
I think that's exactly right. That's how it's going to happen. I am curious with the Hauser stuff, though. I thought it was possible that Hauser might just be sign him, the $2 million option for this year, and then figure it out next year. And if you can fit it, or you're making other moves, maybe do that. But you might have to just accept that he's gone because
Brad is just on an extension tear, though.
Hauser starts to feel like a real luxury item for this team.
He does. But like we talked about,
it's not that he's not good. All things considered, you want him on the team versus not. But you got to start making hard choices. I do wonder if Hauser's a casualty in terms of extension there. I could see this going the way of Grant, which is like the deal that they want to sign him to isn't really the deal that he's willing to take. So we'll see.
Yeah, and certainly he's got that tough agent there in Glushan who hasn't given him the many breaks. He commanded the Jalen extension, the Drew one, which was pretty sizable there. So I don't know if you're getting any friendly discount there from him. So we'll see. That's obviously another big one to look out for them. Yeah.
So that's it. We're done. A ton of news today. We didn't expect, 24 hours after, less than 24 hours after the start of free agency, the Celtics doing a lot of things, bringing back Luke, bringing back Keita, re-signing White, and selling the friggin' team. Didn't expect that we'd have this much news in such a short period of time, but we're here for all of it. Bobby Manning's got you covered. So check out clnsmedia.com and subscribe to both our YouTube channels here, the main channel, as well as Celtics All Access. We'll have more stuff on this, and and any and all breaking news as it comes. We've got you covered. Tons of other great podcasts on the network as well. And I'm sure everyone's going to be talking about this news and giving their take and their spin on everything that happened. But Celtics running it back, well positioned, heading into next year, injuries aside, to potentially, make a run at banner 19. Big piece of it today, locking in Derrick White long-term to a team-friendly extension. So that's certainly good news. Good news. We get to hang out with you guys again. We were happy to do it. We'll be back should there be any breaking news. Otherwise, follow us on Twitter here for notifications of our next live show. We will jump back on later in the week and break it down and talk about some other stuff and maybe bring some of the other guys on board, Jimmy, Sherrod, and Josue, and get their take on everything that's gone on in the last 24 to 48 hours. It's been a lot of fun and a lot of activity. Until then, we will see you guys later. Take care.
Wait, Amit's got an outro for us, I think.
No, he doesn't.
He said he was going to work on an outro.
He had a phenomenal game.
Forfeit's out. I think it's an option.
That did not sound like a chair.
It was a freaking chair. It does sound like a chair.